Hey, Liudmila. Hey, everyone who's listening. It's great to be back. We're here to talk more about SEO, artificial intelligence, and the impact the artificial intelligence has on the businesses and how digital marketing is getting directly impacted by what's going on right now, the disruptive changes in the technology. Liudmila has tons of experience in SEO, and she's very actively involved in Gen AI search engine optimization techniques that are starting to appear on the market. She wanted to share a lot of thoughts and findings on that. Liudmila?
Hey, thank you, Dmitry, for having me, and thanks everybody for joining. To everybody who is listening, I believe that we all woke up in the new reality right now. Imagine that 700 million weekly users. That's more than 10% of all the internet population. And that's how many people are using ChatGPT, just one of language models, large language model tools that we have out there, every week. That's the shift that we cannot ignore.
And this is huge because ChatGPT is sometimes being used as a form of Google. Sometimes for more specific business applications, people build really complex agentic flows. People do research. People build whole applications around it. And as you have mentioned, ChatGPT is just one of the many, right? We can name Grok, Google Gemini, Anthropic's Claude, and then there is DeepSeek. The numbers are tremendous when you add them all up. Typically, the starting scenario for everyone is to use ChatGPT as a form of Google. How do I do something? What is the best product? Give me the DIY instructions, or maybe how do I cook a particular dish? In the past, we used Google for things like that. So ChatGPT and AI tools in general are becoming largely a research self-education tool. Would that be right to say, or Liudmila, did you notice something else going on?
So, to a certain extent, that is correct. However, there is a fundamental difference between Google and LLM-driven tools like Perplexity, Gemini, and others. And it's called semantic search, where in Google, when you plug in the results, all you get is a bunch of links. Now, it also has AI overviews. It tries to give you answers faster, but still, Google is tied up to its own technology of giving you links, not answers. And this is where LLM-driven platforms are so different, because the semantic search is the technology that understands the meaning and intent behind the words. It's not keyword-driven. It's question-driven, intent-driven, and what's more important, context-driven. So this is where you get answers in structured format rather than a bunch of links that you still need to click and explore before you get to your ideal recipe or the best Italian restaurant nearby. Google takes you to different websites. ChatGPT and similar tools are designed to give you answers right here and right now.
This is a very interesting point, and you mentioned a lot of terms that may be foreign to many of the people listening. So why don't we dive into some of those terms that sound complex, but they don't have to be? And our narrative might sound a little convoluted and confusing to the listener unless we explain ourselves. What do you think of that?
Sure, let's do it.
Why didn't I start with something as simple as, what is artificial intelligence, right? This term is so vague and it's being used all the time. So it's a big area of computer science, but we can boil it down to a system designed to simulate human thinking and decision-making. It's important to remember that it is not actually thinking. It is a very complex set of instructions and algorithms. So it can solve problems. It can recognize patterns, which is really its superpower, recognizing the patterns. It can understand the human language, the way we speak, the way we type things in the chatbot windows. And it serves as the foundation of everything else that we're going to discuss later today.
That's a really good definition in the field of AI. It all started back in the day with machine learning, because this is how AI originated. And to be transparent, I had some ML courses in universities, so I played around with very simple, basic models. But this is the foundation. Machine learning is data science area where we can train computer programs, machines, to learn from data themselves. This is the fascinating thing that's underlying probably any AI tool out there. ML, machine learning, is the technology that empowers machines to learn from themselves over time.
AI is not really smart in the human sense of word, right? It is a machine and a very complex set of algorithms. By the way, what's algorithm? For those who didn't take the computer science course in college, step-by-step set of instructions the computer follows to complete a task. If the instructions are incomplete, that algorithm will fail or be overly simplistic. So really, all that happens behind the scenes, and it's obviously overly simplified view of things, but all that happens behind the scenes is there's an enormous amount of data that is being processed by complex algorithms. Patterns are being detected, and then once detected, they will be displayed to you in the form of the result. And that's what with machine learning is the art of making sense out of vast amounts of data. So how does the data get in there? People or scripts, they go around the internet and they scrub the web pages. There were lawsuits lately and a couple of big LLM, another good definition, which I'm going to cover next. A number of those companies responsible for developing AI, they got into copyright laws. All those books, recipes, all of those calls, all of those talk shows, everything that's on YouTube, all of that has been scrubbed and stored in a gigantic database and analyzed by complex algorithms. And then it is presented to you in the form of AI ChatGPT response when you ask it something. What can you find in that database? And I think we're slowly starting to go back to the original point of this conversation. How do people use it and how does it know everything in the world? Reality is it only knows the things that were fed to it and were processed through those machine learning algorithms. So in order to be found in AI search results, you want to be a part of that data set. And that's one of the most important things we wanted to talk about today. Is that correct?
That is true. And from the marketing perspective, this is the fundamental shift that every business needs to know. You have to be on that new media or you're non-existent to at least 10% of internet population that is using ChatGPT every single week. So, Dmitry, this is a great point, like the LLM term. And I wanted to double down on it a little bit because LLMs convert the words.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Because maybe we didn't give a definition of it. LLM stands for large language model. It is an AI that's been trained on vast collections of text to understand and generate human-like language. For most people, LLM and AI are pretty much the same thing. AI is a more general term. LLM is that fundamental building block that is responsible for providing the outputs that you're seeing in ChatGPT or in Claude or in Gemini. But it is the cornerstone of all AI systems. Are used a lot and confusing.
And for the sake of LLMs, there are also small language models, which are SLMs. Those are more like narrowly trained and actually technically smaller models that can serve us still for solving a particular tasks. But almost everywhere you go on the Perplexity, ChatGPT, Gemini, you will be dealing with LLMs. And how large language models are designed, they are trained on the vast amount of data, and then they can be tuned up by their creators to serve our humans better. There is no magic behind it, unfortunately. Sorry if it disappoints those of you who, maybe like me, are still amazed what GPT and other tools can do and what they actually know. But it is still a machine. The first step of LLM optimization, or making sure that LLMs know about your business or brand, is embedding the data, seeding the data about your brand or business directly to the model training data. How LLMs learn about the world? They scrape, they analyze, they take the creators of LLMs are feeding to them, and largely they take knowledge from websites, Wikipedia, Medium, your company website, your LinkedIn page. So everywhere a human would research your brand.
Or your subject matter. If we understand how those super intelligent and super complex, but nevertheless still machines work, I think we can better understand how to serve them the data that will actually have impact on your business. Basically, it was a breakthrough when in early 2000s, Google came on the market and made a lot of businesses findable, and quality of the content that Google was able to unearth was tremendous. Because before that, everything was just a collection of links. Those who remember the good old days of Alta Vista or old Yahoo, those were just static links. All of a sudden, content appeared dynamically, and it was very relevant depending on your location. If you were in Paris, you wouldn't be seeing things that are happening in Mexico, or they would be further down the page. That was referenced more often would be at the top of the page too. Google actually borrowed that from scientific quotation citation mechanism, right? The more a particular work is being referenced, the more authoritative it's likely to be. So LLMs work in the same way. It is important that the data is readable, deep, well-structured, And then it will be able to understand it, detect those patterns, and serve it more frequently, as opposed to something that's scratchy and poorly structured and difficult to detect the patterns in your original data. It will be used a lot less. We can think of that as having a very clean sheet of information that's printed out in a printer in big bold letters, and you're reading off that piece of paper, as opposed to some really drafts and napkin quality notes. It's difficult to use, and therefore you're less likely to use it. Another person might not be able to understand your handwriting if you pass it to them. So LLMs are no different. AI prefers that well-structured data, or it will not be able to interpret it correctly. It may position you not as advantageously as if you were providing more data, and it's high quality, well-structured. What does that mean, really? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that in terms of e-commerce and in the context of a business that offers services or sells products, and it could be both B2B and B2C.
This is where things become super interesting because models have two types of memories. They have the training memory, which is a long-term training data, and it is hazy. So LLMs don't have a clear understanding of the world as we humans do. They have vague definitions by nature in their mind. LLMs have long-term memory, which is a frozen memory, and it's quite hazy. That's their training understanding about the world, your brand, and LLMs don't deal with specifics too much when they use their long-term memory. However, things become super interesting when we deal with the short-term memory, which is based on the context of your conversation with an LLM. Imagine you typing something on ChatGPT and asking for a solution or outcome or any other information about the current situation in the market. If you are talking just to the LLM memory, if you do not have the search function enabled, you might face some hallucinations because if the model doesn't know the answer, it is very likely it will just... Dmitry, go ahead.
Please finish your thought, because I wanted to really dive into the topic of hallucinations. People I speak to frequently get amazed by the fact that AI behaves the way it behaves, but please finish your thought.
This is why understanding the two types of memories like that LLMs typically have is super important. Most of the hallucinations, we will talk about them in a second, they originate from the fact that model doesn't know something and it just invents, it generates the answer out of the best possible answer that it can predict. So it's not data-driven to 100% when we are talking to model memory. However, when we are talking about the live augmented results, things become very different because the model goes out there, looks up information, let's say, about your brand online, and it mixes and matches everything that it finds really quickly. They don't go too deep. They will not read 200 pages about your brand. They will just scratch the surface, compare it to what they have in the long-term memory, and update the answer in their conversation with the user almost real time. So this is where things become super important for the business owners, stakeholders, everybody who is willing to get the most of this new media, AI and LLMs for their business, understanding that there is a hazy long-term memory, but there's also context-based live memory of most of the models. When you would like to optimize for them, you need to optimize for both aspects. Understanding those aspects is super important. However, we just talked about the hallucinations. Hallucinations originate from the longer-term memory. Maybe you can talk a little bit more about the business implications of those.
Absolutely. It's important to know hallucination is an official technical term. It's not made up. It's not a slang. Basically, it is when AI produces information that appears confident and sounds factual, but actually is inaccurate or entirely fabricated. And that is not a bug per se. It's actually by design. That's how LLMs and AI models are designed to work. They're gigantic pattern recognition and prediction engines. They try to predict what comes next. When you say Michael Jordan, it predicts that Michael Jordan is commonly mentioned in the context of basketball. When you say Tom Brady, it will not say hockey. It will not look for football. It will look for football, not basketball. Yet, if LLM is not able to give you facts from its own database, it will look for something that's next closest. And we may run into the situation when your request is basically the user who's working with GPT, just asking questions and expecting straight answers. That question does not land anywhere close to the real facts of the world that the system was trained on, that were loaded in that permanent memory. The system will try to please you. It will try to predict what would have been the best real world outcome. It's not making it up. It's important to remember that's by design. That's how the system is supposed to work. That strength becomes its weakness, but you can work around it. The best thing to work around it realistically is to feed it more data about your business, about what matters to you. But if that's not possible, somehow we're not in that long-term memory. What else can we do? If you're the user, you can use the techniques of prompt engineering, how you're asking AI to respond to you. Asking it in simple one-sentence questions typically is not good enough. A good prompt, a good question on a complex topic can easily take a full page, maybe 2 pages. I've seen prompts that are 7 pages long. This dramatically improves the quality of the output you're getting. There are techniques that prevent hallucination. The more specific you are, the better the outcomes will be. Our goal is to avoid AI making up things about our business. We want to be known if we're producing gaskets or industrial equipment, or maybe we're a distributor of janitorial supplies or selling wheels and tires. Maybe it's a chain of massage salons in the Midwest US. It doesn't matter. We want to be really well known for what we do, the kinds of services that we offer, where in geographic locations, warehouses or stores or salons are located. Feed as much information as possible. Make sure it's as current and as structured as possible. And then hallucinations will not appear. Because if you repeat to AI hundreds of millions of times that Michael Jordan and basketball are effectively synonyms, it will never make a mistake of miscategorizing what sport he was playing. As opposed to searching for something very rare and very specific. What exact game did Michael Jordan play on September 27th of 1988? It might struggle. It might come up with something very fake in response. So you want your data about your business to be as full and structured as possible. Ideally, it almost looks like a spreadsheet.
I have good news and bad news for everybody who is listening. The bad news is you cannot reconfigure what's in the model's long-term memory. But the good news is that you can work to optimize your own resources, your own data, first of all, to be more structured, more accessible, more useful for both LLMs and humans, to be better represented in the next generation of the models. Let me give you a quick example. I have personally completed more than 400 B brands LLMs visibility audits. And the framework that we're using, we're first looking at what's in the memory of the model, then we're looking at what's in the live audit. So no search function, and then the search function enabled. The second thing about the live audit, it shows us where models search for information about your brand when they are explicitly asked about your brand. And this is amazing how often the model goes to your own website, your LinkedIn company page, your Twitter, your Facebook, your own media for your brand. When we want to make the optimization for LLMs practical, this is one of the first steps that from the marketing perspective, I recommend doing right away, is running the audit and understanding where you are, looking at where the model takes that information about your brand, and immediately coming up with a step-by-step plan that will audit your existing positioning. Ask yourself a question. When was the last time you updated your LinkedIn business description page?
That's
Me,
a great call.
myself, I had to do it after I saw how rampant my agency is misrepresented in the LLM's live audit, and I was wondering, where does it take that information from? So I looked up the citations, and actually I built a tool. It's called Bertology. You can go ahead and run your audit and see what LLMs think about your brand. Those citations pointed me to the fact that I, myself, wasn't taking good care of ramping my own agency. Why? Because I didn't care about updating the information about my own brand and making it structured, easily accessible, and up to date. So to all marketers, to all business owners out there, run that audit and come up with the step-by-step plan how exactly you will be updating your positioning across the highly surfaced pages. Because this is how LLMs learn about the world. If you want to be better presented in the next-gen models, you absolutely have to include this activity into your marketing mix. That's 2025. You cannot delay it any longer.
ChatGPT got released this week. For those watching this later on, today is August 11th. So this is a great example. ChatGPT 5 was trained on data going all the way to spring 2025. The ChatGPT 4 and the previous models, they were trained on data going back to November 2024. So every time they release a new version, which happens roughly every 6 months, there is a 6-month bump in this long-term memory. It gets more current, but it's still frozen in time, so to speak. At some point, there is a cutoff date in the gap of several months. So anyone who wants to be well-known to ChatGPT or Anthropic or Perplexity, say in 2026, they need to put all of that time and effort like right now, because within the next couple of months, that next model that's going to come out is going to freeze in time, and you will have much more difficulty getting the current correct responses about your brand or your product or service.
Unless you work on them, understand where you are, plan for the future, and start executing.
This is exactly what's called AI search optimization. How do you get found and ranked as the top search result in your field, in your domain, by all of those AI search engines, answer engines, recommendation tools, and so forth? Maybe we can even talk a little bit about what is agent, because now I think with improvements in releasing, was it 2 weeks ago, GPT agent, that is becoming a next big thing. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, a couple of things here. First, GPT-5, and again, it's August 11, 2025, and the ChatGPT, actually, you cannot change the model. You can only use what you have, GPT-5, and it decides what kind of tools, what kind of databases, what kind of agents to launch to answer your questions. This didn't make a lot of people happy, let me put it mildly, because a lot of workflows and a lot of custom GPTs, all the work that people have been doing over months with the previous variations of the models suddenly stopped working as designed. This is one of the implications. But when we talk about AI search optimization, this is the strategy. This is one of the marketing strategy components that you absolutely must take on board, because this is how you can affect the way your content is displayed in AI-driven search environment. As businesses have been strategic about SEO, search engine optimization, over the years, now every forward-looking business needs to be strategic about AI search optimization. It's growing. The shift has happened. Your most educated, valuable customers are now on. So you have to be very strategic about where AI search optimization sits in your marketing mix. And as the ecosystem of the models, the agents, becomes more and more complex, we will have less transparency into how exactly the models work. But we will have something else. We will have the agents, very complexly trained AI algorithms that are able to run it from start to finish without human interference. We will have more agent-like experiences across the main LLM models, and GPT-5 is the perfect example. It reasons when it needs to reason. It thinks when it needs to think. It searches when it needs to search. And it is designed to give you the best answer in the shortest amount of time. However, it's more like a black box that we need to be aware of. AI agents, the definition is a little bit broad, but think about it as a piece of AI-empowered software that can solve your problems from start to finish without your interference. You ask a question, you take the problem that you need to solve, bring it to an agent, and it solves it from start to finish.
And I will use my very simplistic definition I wrote out here. AI agent is a piece of software, uses AI and can plan, make decisions, and take actions toward a goal with minimal human input. For example, you could start shopping, or you could find a list of products using ChatGPT agent, and it will actually demonstrate to you its virtual screen and how it browses the website. Or if you're using Perplexity for research, Perplexity will start randomly searching different websites. Just like Liudmila has pointed out, it will not be using its long-term memory. It will try to grab the information off the internet. How does it decide that I need to search now and go to the long-term memory here? How does it decide that I'm going to shop on Amazon versus Walmart Marketplace versus other websites? We don't know. It makes those decisions on its own. But I think, to the point of Mila was saying earlier, they're lazy. Everything that happens in this big black box called AI is still resource constrained. We all know how expensive it is. It's billions and billions of dollars being burned every month. And all of those big corporations, they're losing money on AI. Good decisions require a lot of computational power. So they're going to go for easy decisions. And easy oftentimes means this website or this database system, they're easier to work with. They require less back and forth cycles of ask a question, get a clarification or response, right? In a way, AI agents, they're like resourceful human who also does not want to make their mission more difficult than it should be. They will pick the path of the least resistance to maintain the acceptable level of quality. So if your website is clunky, difficult to navigate, you have a lot of drop-down menus, you have a lot of JavaScript that renders in real time, your links are buried somewhere, requires multiple clicks to get to a certain page, it makes it difficult for the agents to interact with your website. Most likely you will not be picked for booking a reservation, placing an order, for finding a product or a service, for being recommended as a authoritative resource for a particular domain. So agents, they act much like humans. And Literally, that's exactly what your travel agent would do in the good old days. They wouldn't be calling a hotel or a partner or an airline where they know they will have to spend 30 minutes on the phone. That means they cannot serve enough of their own customers and they're losing money. AI is exactly the same. It's going to pick path of least resistance, but it's still going to get you the results you're looking for. And if you are on the receiving side of things, if it's your own websites that's being browsed and being used for citations and recommendations, make it easy for them.
That is so true, because especially in B2B world, that's what I'm looking at over and over when I do those audits in my work. I see it happening even to larger companies. Even if you have the clear website structure, the most important data that you have are product specifications, data sheets, manuals. They are buried in PDFs which are not accessible for LLMs, and it means that you are missing out on feeding the information about your brand, your products, and the value for your customers. You're missing out on feeding that to LLMs in the format they can understand. So a little bit back to the very beginning of our conversation, a couple of fundamental decisions right now are making the data more structured and more accessible for both LLMs and humans. That's number one. Embedding AI optimization, AI SEO, call it all the plethora of the terms out there, embedding AI visibility into the marketing mix, that's the most strategic decision that businesses can take by the end of 2025 or even right now. And last but not least, the new models will appear faster, looking at the amount of investment into all the AI infrastructure. So the earlier you start to work on the right positioning of your B2B or your B2C brand out there on your own website, on the media that you can control, the better you will be presented in the next gen models.
This is a great way to maybe finish up our conversation today, because if you have content and you felt it was not very good or well structured, it's important to remember that your reader is no longer just a human, it's also a machine. You might have a very technical document, maybe it's a research paper, an extremely detailed specification sheet, or even a 3D file over a product, or maybe it's installation manual or maintenance instructions. You might think it's not important. It is correct that the human might not be looking at that document, but for the human to get to your website, they will need to find you through other tools. Whether it is Google search, which is no longer the search we're used to from 2023, it is AI augmented search. And I will also talk a little bit about that, but they will probably more increasingly migrate from classical Google interface into ChatGPT, into Perplexity, the more savvy, high value business customers and savvy, even B2C buyers, let's say searching for an expensive purchase like a car, or maybe building a custom house. Those high ticket purchases, they will be most likely first researched in AI. So AI will trust your website more because you have fed it so much relevant data. Yes, the human will never look at that data, but if that data is not accessible to AI, the human will never get to your website to complete the transaction. So that's a very interesting feedback loop here of a man and machine that is starting to impact website traffic. And I think bringing the whole point home, we're starting to see the website traffic dropping off. The organic search traffic drops, but conversions and the revenues seem to be staying flat. That's what we're hearing from a lot of partners, friends, and clients. Why? Because the traffic that's coming is high intent. The people arrive already being very well informed about your product. And instead of browsing every single page of your website and coming back a week later, they're ready to transact right here and now. I'm shopping for a photo camera, for example, for blogging and vlogging. I'm not going to Amazon. I'm no longer going to the websites I used to look at, Consumer Electronics, Tom's Hardware, all of those authoritative websites. Or similarly, making decisions on the business tools. When I research, I am asking AI to validate for me Capterra, G2, or any other authoritative websites that post reviews for business software, summarize it for me. I don't go there anymore. But exposing that data for AI makes me a paying customer. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. We saw a lot of comparisons and citations in our live audits that we ran through Vertology, the tool that I've built to help businesses answer the question, how exactly are they represented in AI long-term memory and the live memory? Yes, the reviews do matter, but the most important part I encourage every brand to look at is their own website. If you own the data, show it, structure it, make it accessible. It's like very early days of SEO when Google just started indexing the websites and information. The websites that have more information about the products and services, more comparisons, more generative engine optimized content will win over time. This is how LLMs became part of our B2B customer journey at all stages, especially at the bottom of the funnel. So your most educated customers who are most to buy will be coming more and more from the platforms that do the heavy lifting for them. All the research, all the categorization, reviews reading, decision making. So again and again, I encourage every business out there to incorporate AI visibility into the B2B marketing mix.
That's a great way to finish today's conversation. Thank you so much, Liudmila. This was very insightful, and I hope to be speaking with you again shortly.
Thank you, Dmitry. Thanks for having me. And again, to everybody who's listening, do not delay your AI visibility effort. Simply do not.